Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 17 of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Friends of Cole. Katie, we have, per usual, ranking stuff, 2 games to recap, 2 games to preview. We're heading into the home stretch of the regular season. It's kind of crazy. March is like right there on the doorstep. But Katie, before we dive into all of it, just how are you?
Pretty good. I mean, coming off a 1 and 2 week could be better, but still doing good. Looking forward to this week.
It's one of those things where, preseason, you look at those 2 games and of course, we're going to talk about at least one of them because we've already talked about Ole Miss. But one of those games, like you expected to lose those games preseason. You just wish you would have come out with one of those wins. But in the end, Katie, I don't like a big picture. I'm not too worried.
No.
Of course, per usual, we have some ranking stuff to talk about, right? The biggest knock on Kentucky, of course, like you said, went 1-2 last week, and that reflected in the AP poll. Kentucky was number 8. They finally got into top 10 territory, and Katie, they go all the way down to 14. I mean, I guess I can't be mad because, like you said, 1-2 week, you didn't you beat Georgia, which you were supposed to do, but you didn't win either of one of those 2 games. But Katie, what do you take away from that? I mean, obviously, there's more important rankings we'll get to in a minute that are more important this time of the year. But what does that say? Does it really matter to you? Like Kentucky 8-14, or what do you think about that?
No, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, I guess. I don't think, honestly, the AP poll doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things anyway. So, um, we'll talk about the Texas game here in a minute. But with the Texas LSU game, Texas beat LSU by like 15 or 20. I can't exactly remember. But that to
No,
me just shows.
Texas beat LSU. It wasn't that decisive. It was like a 6-7 point game. I think it was 65-58, so 7 point game. I think they were
Well,
up fairly big at one point, but it ended up being a closer game.
still, I mean, I think that that solidifies to me that Texas is probably the best team in the nation right now. I know that Notre Dame is technically number one, but I feel really good about Texas. So yeah, the AP poll, it doesn't really bother me at all. But I mean, of course, you would like to be higher. It's just not in the cards.
Well, it's one of those things, like you talk about Texas. The reason they're behind Notre Dame is because Notre Dame beat them earlier this season.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like the whole South Carolina UCLA thing, like that we had a couple weeks ago, where it's like if they played again, though, who would win? Now,
Hmm.
after South Carolina just got absolutely murdered on their home floor by UConn, I don't know if they'd win that game against UCLA. And by the way, and I know we're not talking about them today, but that does go to show South Carolina is not only beatable, Katie, but they're beatable in Colonial Life Arena. Like
Hmm.
they're not, you know, that I feel like I don't know if I should, but I feel a lot better about that game. I don't feel like we need to go ahead and pencil in that end of the year game as an automatic loss. I feel like Kentucky has a chance. But Katie, Kentucky sitting at number 20 in the net rankings this time around. 8 of the top 20 teams, in the net are in the SEC. Like net rankings, and I thought it was interesting, Katie, because again, we'll talk about it in a second. But the net rankings aren't the only thing that matter. The NCAA selection committee made sure to point that out. Like net rankings, yes, very important. It's not the only thing we're going to look at. But Katie, if the NCAA tournament started, I guess I can't even say that anymore because, like I said, the committee done pointed out that that's not all that matters. But Kentucky,
Hmm.
I think they were at 21, and now they're number 20, so they moved up a little bit in the net. Uh, the good thing is, like, you've lost to Texas, North Carolina, and Ole Miss, who are all top 15 teams in the net. Now, Texas A&M, that's not a great loss, but I mean, that's still a quad 2 game, quad 3, quad. I think it's still quad 2 sitting there, but not the greatest loss in the world. But at the end of the day, you know, top 20 in the net. It's hard to complain about that, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the Texas A&M loss, and I think we'll get into that in just a minute. But or no, we're not because that happened a while back. But Texas A&M is actually a quad three loss. They moved down this past week, which
Ooh.
is really frustrating, but who cares? I mean, we're going to talk about bracketology here in a second with all this stuff coming out. like you said, the net rankings don't even matter that much anymore either. So it's kind of things I think to take with a grain of salt nowadays. Like, I don't really think that the rankings are insanely important. And Kenny said, like, he doesn't even know where they're ranked. So
Yeah.
obviously they don't care. The rankings are interesting and they're fun to look at, but I think at this point in the season, there's more important things on your plate.
Um, I didn't realize A&M is down to a quad 3 loss. That's not great at all. I mean, quad 2 was bad enough, but quad 3 is really not good. It's it's one of those games, Katie, that at the end of the year it's going to worry me to death because Kentucky's going to be, I think, unless they win out or something, I think Kentucky's kind of going to be right on the fringe of being a 4 seed or a 5 seed,
Mhm.
and in the NCAA tournament. And I hope that game isn't the game that decides, you know what, Kentucky, you don't get to host the first 2 rounds. You're actually going to be a 5 seed now. And the good thing about Kentucky is that they have some decent resume wins. They're 4-3 in quad 1. Like it's not obvious. It's not as good as some teams' resumes, but Katie, it's not bad by any means to be 4-3 in quad 1. You always want to have a winning record there, but I think regardless, like being a top 20 team in the net, anytime a team plays you, it's a quad 1 game for them. Like I feel
Mhm.
like that's something to take note of. Katie, in the ESPN's latest bracketology, Kentucky actually moved up to a 3 seed. It was like I think they've been a 5 seed, a 4 seed, and a 3 seed in the latest bracketologies. Duke, North Carolina, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State, the other 3 seeds. So all of those, they call it the triangle there in North Carolina with all those teams, are your other 3 seeds. Like that's pretty good company to be in. I mean, Duke hung on with number 1 Notre Dame at Notre Dame for a while.
Mhm.
Notre Dame kind of pulled away in the end. NC State and Duke. Of course, I was just talking about Duke, but NC State and Duke had a great game before. North Carolina destroyed Kentucky on their home floor, and they've done really good in the ACC play too. Like, ESPN bracketology, it was kind of based off the NCAA's preview that we're about to talk about. But Katie, I mean, I thought Kentucky be kind of fringe 4 or 5 in the next bracketology and kind of for the rest of the season, but it seems like Charlie Cream and the folks at ESPN are maybe a little bit higher on Kentucky than we are.
I feel like they kind of are thinking, Kentucky's probably going to beat Missouri this week and then going to win one of the last 3 games, and maybe that will lock in the 3 seed. But these are updated twice a week. So I do feel like this next update that we see, Kentucky might end up at a 4, just because where they are. I know I said the rankings don't really matter, but when you take the quadrant wins into consideration, I do think that that will have an effect on it, especially if Texas A&M keeps moving down. I think that they're at like 93 right now, and since that game was away for Kentucky, it gives them a little bit more cushion when it comes to the quadrants there, but I think it's good to be the 3 seed right now. Like, that's exactly where you want to be. But and with these other teams, like, you don't want to see UNC again unless you see them at the end. So I think that this is a good spot right now.
And I think it's one of those things where Kentucky's in a kind of an iffy spot because, again, like ESPN has them as a 3. NCAA, which we'll go ahead and talk about the NCAA and their official bracket preview had Kentucky at a 4. Now, albeit the highest 4 seats and they're number 13 overall, but it's not like they're, a 3 or a 2 with so much cushion. But I say that, Katie, because Kentucky, like I said in the official bracket preview, 13th overall 4 seed. I think what that means is that Kentucky, yes, while they're in a kind of iffy spot where you need to win games, at the same time, though, you control your own destiny.
Hmm.
Like this isn't where you need to see like, oh no, we need Alabama to drop 1 for us to be okay, or we need Oklahoma or Ole Miss or whoever to drop a game so we're okay. Kentucky, you know, the most important rankings that we've talked about, where Kentucky is now a 4 seed. According to the NCAA's committees, according to them, like Katie, I think that's the most important thing to take away is that the NCAA, they see Kentucky as a 4 seed and, pushing for a 3 seed rather than they're closer to a 3 seed rather than being
Mm-hmm.
closer to a 5. But Just what do you take away from that? Because again, like it says on the bottom of our graphic, first two rounds would be in Lexington if Kentucky can be a 4 seed, Katie.
It's very comfortable, and getting to play those first 2 rounds in Lexington would be huge, to have that home court advantage. I do think that this one is more important than the ESPN kind of mock seeding, but we've been saying this not all season, but pretty much for the second half of the season, that Kentucky would end up at a 4 seed. So I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with where they are, and as long as they don't drop to the 5 seed, I don't really see any issue.
And it's one of those things, and you alluded to it earlier, talking about the home stretch of the regular season and what does Kentucky kind of need to do. I think you checked one of the boxes by beating Georgia. You need to go beat Missouri. You're just a better. I know it's on the road, but you're just better than they are. They're 2-10 in conference, Katie. Like, you need to go beat Missouri. But the other point is that when those last 3 games between Tennessee, LSU, and South Carolina, you have to find a way to win one. You just have to find a way to win one. Now, I personally think like Tennessee is a really good matchup for Kentucky, and I think Kentucky's probably objectively better than Tennessee. So that's the game I'm looking at for Kentucky to win. But you have to find again, LSU at home, Tennessee at home, at South Carolina. I think you're okay. I think you can live if you go 0 for 3, but I think you really, really, really want to find a way to win at least one of those games, Katie.
I think that you can be thankful that the South Carolina game is on the road if you lose, because that looks better for you, just because South Carolina is so good at home. Obviously, like you said earlier, they are beatable, but what are the odds of that? They've hardly lost a home game in 15 years. So, it's something interesting to look at. But I think what worries me more is that Tennessee and LSU are both at home, and they're sold out games. And if you lose both of those games, it's going to look worse on you. I do think that Tennessee is going to be the one that you probably can win. I think LSU is also pretty beatable, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, I feel a little bit more comfortable with the Tennessee game, but the LSU game should be good too.
I just think if you're Kentucky, and again, like I just think it's pretty simple, because not only do you have to think about the NCAA tournament, but you also have to think about the SEC tournament. And I think the path to having a double bye, to hosting the first 2 rounds, beat Missouri, win one of these next 3 coming up against Tennessee, LSU, and South Carolina. Katie, we're going to go ahead and give a quick shout to our friends over at Friends of Cole, been sponsoring us all the way through this season, following us through here. So, Friends of Cole, they are dedicated to informing and educating Kentucky citizens about the coal industry and its vital role in the state's future. We provide a united voice for an industry that has been and remains a critical economic contributor to Kentucky. By working together, we can provide good jobs and benefits for future generations. Coal is resilient, reliable, and affordable. Friends of Coal is a volunteer organization. All are invited to be a part of our organization, which consists of proud Kentuckians as well as residents from beyond our borders. Head to friendsofcoalkentucky.org to learn more. Now, Katie, I don't want to talk about it because it wasn't fun, but I think we have to talk about it because it happened, right? I mean, it's pretty plain and simple. Kentucky lost to Texas, and not only lost to Texas, but it wasn't very competitive for, the last 30 minutes of the game or so, right? 67-49, the final score. Kentucky at one point, I think they had I think it was a 24-23 lead, maybe 23-22, something like that. And I thought, Katie, I really thought Kentucky was going to be there in the thick of it in the final stretch. I thought Kentucky was going to, I thought this was going to be like a 2-possession game, whether you won or lost. But Katie, it was so deflating to me to see Kentucky, be uncompetitive there towards the end of that game. I can't hear you.
I was muted. I'm sorry, but
right.
It was really, I was just going to say, it was really kind of frustrating because of the early foul trouble. And I think that is kind of one of those things that is going to have to improve. And it already has, playing against bigger SEC teams that, are going to be more physical than you. Clara Stratt got into super early foul trouble, and she actually ended up fouling out, I think, early in the fourth quarter, if not third quarter. Um, and she's the best big on the floor. So you want to keep her in for as long as you can. But with early foul trouble, like there's really nothing you can do about that. Especially because I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like some of the fouls were a little wishy-washy. I didn't really agree with some of the calls, but that is the game of basketball. You can't really control what the referees see. So, at the end of the day, I think it's just important to stay out of foul trouble and make sure that you can compete with teams that are bigger than you.
It's one of those things that Clara Strack, of course, she had no points, played 18 minutes and fouled out, right? She obviously did not play great. I think that goes without saying. But Katie, I almost feel like it wasn't even entirely her fault. She didn't play great. Like, I mean, I think Kenny said it after the Georgia game. Where, at that point they'd already went back and watched tape from the Texas game, and he was like, 4 of those fouls, we just kind of scratched our head. And I think he said it on the radio last night. Like, he was like, we were just kind of scratching our head. Like, what in the world, are those really fouls? Like, I mean, like we're talking about like soft touches on the shoulder. Like, is that a foul really? But, I mean, I don't know. It feels like in women's basketball, the whistles are just – they seem to really, really, really like using those whistles, like the fouls. I mean, I remember Ole Miss, what was it, like 50 total team fouls it seemed like? Oklahoma was like that too. Like, I just don't understand I don't understand what the whole deal is with the whistles in women's basketball, Katie. It just seems kind of unnecessary. Like, Tiani Key had 4. Like, what are we doing, right? Now, I want to say I thought Kentucky played really well defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Texas only shot 38% from the field. They made 1 3. They went 1 of 12 and 8% from the three-point line. Now, where Kentucky got beat was, again, similar to Ole Miss. You were just there's only certain words they like me to use around here. Kentucky was handled on the offensive glass. We'll say that. I mean, 20-5. Texas beat Kentucky on the offensive glass and 45-28 overall. Katie, you're not going to win basketball games being outmatched like that.
No, not at all. And I think that this Texas game honestly came at the worst possible time because Kenny Brooks said after the Georgia game that Amelia Hassett had been sick. And this was probably the game that you did not want her to be sick for because for this whole season we've been talking about she's been on the cusp of a double-double like every single game. And she's one of the best rebounders on the team, and Tiani Key is probably the other one that I would say. They're just aggressive and they know how to get into the paint and grab those rebounds. And I feel like without them, they were unable to get the defensive stops that they needed. Or just without Amelia, she wasn't 100%. So it's kind of difficult to pick up the slack for her whenever you're only one person as Tiani.
And I think it is important to note about Amelia because for both Texas and Ole Miss, we were like, well, she scored 2 total points in those games. And you're sitting there like, what in the world is going on? Like, she's been averaging like 10 points a game all year. And it wasn't, I guess since Kenny did say in that presser and on the radio last night that Amelia was sick, I think it's fair to say, Katie, like we kind of heard that too behind the scenes. I didn't feel like it was my place to put that out. I figured out a little bit after the Ole Miss game, but I didn't think it was our place to put that out there. I get it. We're journalists. And, journalist, I mean, this is KSR. But, I just didn't feel like it was my place to put out there that Amelia was feeling under the weather. But it's like Kenny said on the radio, or maybe it was Georgia. I can't. Kenny talks so much that I'm not even sure when he's talking. But I think it was the radio when he was talking about Amelia's character, and I do think he's right about that. Like, I don't know how sick Amelia was necessarily, but I do think it's, commendable that she, even if she wasn't giving her best effort or, wasn't playing up to her standards is probably the better way to say. I do think it's commendable, Katie, that, she was out there and understood that Kentucky, like, hey, we don't have much depth. So I need to, if I can, suck it up and go out there and play. And again, I know it wasn't your best, but I do think it's commendable, Katie, that Amelia at least gave it the old college try.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like had Clara Strack not fouled out or gotten into foul trouble, Amelia probably would have been able to take more breaks. She played 37 minutes out of 40. So to be sick and play 37 minutes of basketball, I just gotta applaud her because that's crazy. I mean, I am complaining when I'm sick for 2 seconds and I'm just sitting at the desk in class, like, so, I mean, she did what she needed to do, I feel like. I mean, obviously, it's a tough situation because the bench is there's not a lot of depth. Um, Basically, my point is, had Clara Strack not fouled out or gotten into foul trouble, Amelia probably would have been able to rest because I would say that Clara Silva would have played a little bit more. It would have been a little bit more able to have her on the floor for more time than she was. I don't know how much she actually played, but yeah, I mean, a lot of words for that little bit that I had to say. But yeah.
And Katie, you got an okay effort from Georgia Amore, right? She had 14 points, but she only shot 5 of 16 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3, and then got 3 assists. Like, if you know, it's like Vic Schaefer pointed it out after the game. Like, you kind of have to focus on her on defense, and it just wasn't her best game. But at the same time, I feel like she was the only one who was kind of able to, like, I don't want to say get open, Katie, but I feel like Georgia's the only one who was able to at least create her own shot. And
Mhm.
I don't know if I should be worried about that moving forward, but I did notice that. But Katie, Tiani Key continues to impress me. Like, even when things are going bad, it doesn't matter. See, I think I said this one time. It doesn't matter how high the highs are or how low the lows are. Tiani Key is like a steady. She's steady and consistent, right? 12 points, 10 rebounds from her. Katie, I just, like I said, I continue to be impressed by her, but it's just one of those things. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on, Katie. I feel like I can rely. I think really Kentucky and Kenny can rely on Tiani Key to be productive.
I feel like since the UNC game way back in what, December, she has been on this upward trend and just continues to get better every single game. And I love to see that because she is fast and she can she's starting to shoot the three ball, which is crazy because she wasn't doing that earlier and she's doing a great job at that. So it's really fun to watch her develop her shot over time, but also be able to be big and physical in the paint and get the points and get the rebounds that this team so desperately needed.
Now that the Texas game is over, it's like you said, Texas could very well be the number one team in the country. Of course, they're ranked number two, but at this point in the year, they could be the best team in the country, or at least the way they're playing. I mean, three. I think they have three consecutive like top 10 wins, like incredible, and two of them on the road. Like, Texas is playing out of their minds right now. But Katie, I try to remember our preseason expectations because I'm guilty of getting caught in the moment where I'm like, okay, you're number 8. Texas is number 3. It's on your home floor. Let's go win this thing. Kentucky, you had a lead, whatever it was, 22-23, 24-23, whatever it was. Like, let's go win this game. And it was so disappointing for me to see Kentucky just get absolutely dominated, in the later part of that game. I mean, Oldacre, who, wasn't, Madison Booker, like she did Madison Booker things. Rory Harmon was Rory Harmon. Well, actually, Rory didn't even have a great game. She had 5 rebounds, 4 assists, but only scored 2 points. Like, Madison Booker had her 19, and of course, Taylor Jones, she had 15 per usual, but it was it felt like it was Oldacre, right? Like, she had 19 as well. And Katie, what that tells me is just like Claire Strack, and it's hard to blame Claire Strack, but the bigs in general, man, they got some work to do. They've got some things to iron out. They are still a work in progress. I'm not worried about like next year or anything. That's the one thing I hated from this Texas game was that I saw on social media people are like talking about next year and talking about we just don't have it. We're not Texas, and so we should just mail it in and you know look forward to next season. Like, what do you like? Kentucky could be a double bye in the SEC and host the first 2 rounds in the SEC of the NCAA tournament. Like, you could not want anything better. But I do think it's important to note, Katie, like, it was disappointing to see that, like, here's Texas, and you're 18 points from being Texas. I
Mhm.
thought Kentucky was more, 7, 8 points to being Texas. I was disappointed, Katie, that there was that much disparity there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I truly feel like, and maybe this is crazy, but had Kentucky not gone into foul trouble, I do think that there's probably like an 85% chance that you come out with that win. I mean, Memorial was pretty packed. The crowd
Oh
was
yeah.
really good. The energy was there. It was just not being able to compete with Texas's bigs. And I'm looking at the stats right now. Kentucky was outscored in the paint 42-24, and that's 18 points. That's the 18 points that you could have had. And it's disappointing because you know that Kentucky could have won, not that you expected them to lose. Because it was there. It just didn't happen, and that's okay. I think I'm not so worried about this game because you know the talent's there and you know that it will like it can happen. And I don't know. I mean, that's the 18 points that you needed. If Clara Strack was in the game, I think she would have gotten them, truthfully.
I think I'd be worried about this game if Kentucky didn't go on the road at Oklahoma and beat them.
Mhm.
Because that game showed me Kentucky can hang with some of the best, and even on the road.
Mhm.
It's just I was disappointed to see Kentucky again, like you said, in front of that crowd at home. I was just disappointed, Katie, to see
Yeah.
that result. But as disappointed as I was about that game, I was equally as thrilled with the Georgia game. Kentucky come out, they won that game 84-55, win by 29 points. I mean, you handle Georgia like you're supposed to handle Georgia, right? Kentucky had a good lead at the end of the first quarter. I think it was a 15-point lead if I remember correctly. I think it was 30-15, to be exact. By the way, offense was absolutely clicking at that point. I mean, I know you weren't going to score 120, but you're on pace to score 120. Like, can't complain too much there. Like, I was really pleased with Sunday's win, Katie. Like, I don't think there was hardly anything from that game that I was able to look at and really be nitpicky about, which is crazy because I'm
Yeah.
I'm very nitpicky, as you've come to find out. Like, I tend to look at things and be like, okay, this wasn't great, but Katie, I don't really have a whole lot of negative to say about this game.
No, I mean, honestly, it was refreshing and it was much needed. You had all 5 starters in double digits, and that's always awesome to see. Because I mean, if you scored 30 points in the first quarter against Texas, like maybe you could have won. Like that's how you know that the talent is there because of games like this. And I feel like this game, even though you pretty much knew that Kentucky was going to go in and beat Georgia, it's good confidence booster, I think.
And for sure, I mean, I think Kentucky, and I think I tweeted this out during the game. I wish some of the threes that Kentucky hit would have went in against Texas. Like Kentucky, 11-23. I know they almost made half of their 3-point attempts, Katie. But it would have been nice to see maybe some of those going against Texas. But I guess I can't be too mad because you got the win again that you really needed to get. It's like we were talking about. This is one of those two that Kentucky kind of just has to get, and you want it, and you want it pretty handily. Katie, I think the main person we got to talk about is Georgia Amore, 21.7 assists. And I think it's important to note, as you can see on her screen, she became the fourth player, and get this, Katie, the fourth player in the history of D1 basketball. Now, that's not just women's basketball, that includes men's basketball too, to record at least 2,300 career points and 800 career assists. Now, Katie, obviously, if you're watching this video, you see the names at the bottom. But if you're just listening, think about these names. Sabrina Ionescu, who was an absolute star at Oregon and is now a star in the WNBA, just won a championship at the Liberty. Isaiah Stevens, who at Colorado State had a pretty good career. I'd say I would say like Isaiah Stevens is one of the more random names on the list, but I do like I'm pretty sure like I think he played from like 2019 to last year. Like Isaiah Stevens had a pretty good career at Colorado State. But Katie, there's just one other person that Georgia Amore is in the same company with. And of course, you can see it if you're watching the video, but if you're listening, Katie, who is that other person that Georgia Amore is in that same era of?
I think her name might be Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark. Oh, I think I know who that is. But yeah, anyway, but I mean, just absolutely incredible stuff from Georgia Amore, right? Like, that is, again, 4 players in the history of D1 basketball have done it. Katie, how about Georgia Amore, man?
I mean, she is an All-American. She definitely proved that after, you know, us being nitpicky again, saying, "Oh, I don't know about why is Georgia Amore not scoring 30 points a game?" Well, now she is, and now she has made history again. And I actually have the exact numbers. So as of February 18th, she has 2,310 points and 828 assists, which is just crazy. I mean, so crazy. She's so talented. And I think what's even crazier is, granted, I'm not up to date on my Georgia Amore freshman year knowledge, but I'm just going to come out and assume that she probably was not scoring 20 points a game her freshman season,
She
probably not
was
her
not.
sophomore season.
Yeah.
So, really, the biggest chunk of this has been happening for these past 2 years. I'm just so impressed with her. She's amazing.
Georgia Amore, throughout her 5-year career, she's always averaged north of 11 points per game. She averaged 11.8 her freshman year, 11.2. And then it was really her junior year, she kind of catapulted 16.3 points, last year 18.8, and this year career high 19.0. But it just goes to show, like, Georgia Amore, man, it's such a shame she's only in Lexington for a year, because I mean, we talked about this. I don't know if it was last episode or which episode it was. I mean, she could go down as one of the best to ever do it in the blue and white. And if she can take Kentucky to places they've never been, maybe she's the GOAT. Maybe it's way too early to say that now, but let's see in April what the resume looks like for Georgia Amore at the end. But just incredible game for her against Georgia. Incredible performances throughout her career that's led her up to this point. Katie, I talked about her being impressive, but Tiani Key, she did it again against Georgia. 14 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists. I mean, Tiani Key just absolutely killing it. But I want to give a shout out to Amelia Hassett, because she came back. I mean, she's been playing, but she came back to her normal self, or at least closer to that. 14 points, only 3 rebounds, but she did have 2 steals and 2 blocks apiece, so that's really nice to see. But Katie,
Mm-hmm.
Deja Lawrence, 15 points, 5 rebounds, and then Clara Strack, who did not foul out this time around, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks. Like, Katie, I say all of that and read all those stats because you just this was a good game, man. And it was so nice after those rough 2 games before against Ole Miss and Texas to see Georgia Amore and Kentucky and everyone kind of come together and put together just a really solid performance against a team like Georgia that you were supposed to be.
Yeah, and I loved how we got to see a little bit of bench action too. Not a ton, but Lexi Blue played 24 minutes, and I feel like we don't typically see that from her. She only had 5 points, but she made a three, and I think that it was kind of one of the more memorable moments of the game when she made that three. I don't know like the exact timestamp, but I do remember the moment, and I remember the crowd going crazy and the bench going crazy because she's just a freshman and everyone loves their freshmen. Like, she is just doing such a great job for this or this end of regular season kind of run. But yeah, we got to see a lot more of Cassidy Rowe than we had been seeing, which is always great to see. She played 12 minutes, and then Clara Silva had 9, and Sinai Tyler played 4. So it's good to see that Kenny felt comfortable going to his bench a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it was just such a fun game to watch, and it was definitely needed.
Well, I thought it was important for Lexi Blue to get as much run as she did. And not only
Mhm.
get as much run as she did, but she really capitalized on it. Yes, she only scored 5 points, but like you said, she hit one of the more memorable shots of the game with her three. She grabbed 3 rebounds, had an assist. But Katie, I think the most important thing about Lexi Blue is probably the stuff that we don't even see on the stat sheet or here on the box score. Like, I mean, I'm admittedly not a basketball coach, so I couldn't tell you, or I don't have Kenny's defensive scheme. But just with my untrained eye, I thought she played really well defensively. I thought she kind
Mhm.
of held her own against some of the more formidable opponents. Like Trinity Turner, who, I think she had 20 points at halftime. I think they put Lexi Blue on her starting the second half, and she had 2 points the rest of the game. She finished with 22 points, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like Lexi Blue. She had a plus minus of 24. Like, that's really impressive to have that good of a plus minus. 24 minutes and then 24 plus minus. That's super impressive. But Katie, you talk about Lexi Blue and you talk about the stats you can see. I thought she did really well with kind of the things that you can't see. And I thought that was super, super important moving forward. Maybe Kenny can extend that rotation and that bench just a little bit by rotating Lexi Blue in some more.
Yeah, and then assuming that she decides to stay at Kentucky for, the next few years, I'm excited to see how Kenny can develop her and see what she can do at Kentucky because I feel like she could also go down as someone who will be one of the greatest to wear blue and white, and it's fitting because, Lexi Blue. But it's just fun to watch her because she is young, and I think that she plays a lot more maturely than you would think that a freshman would. Clearly, Kenny sees a lot in her because she's already playing 20 plus minutes a game, but just really happy for her.
I think Lexi Blue, Katie, she and I could play the same amount of minutes for the rest of her career at Kentucky, and she would automatically be one of the best to ever wear blue and white just because her name is Lexi Blue. I mean, that is the most Kentucky Wildcat name of all time. But Katie, we talk about the two games Kentucky just played, but there's two more coming up, and that starts with Missouri on Thursday. Now, Missouri, they're sitting there at 2-10 in the SEC, 13-14 overall. I know it's on the road, but this is just like Georgia. You got to go win this one, Katie. I think that's the main thing to say about Missouri.
Yeah, and it's weird because you look at Missouri's record and they don't look very good, but then you actually look at the games that they're losing, and they lost to Tennessee by only 5. They only lost to Texas by 11, and that was at Texas. They only lost to LSU by 11. Like, they are staying in these games, and so they're a good team. I think it's just a matter of finishing for them, and I feel like that might be where issues come. It might not be starting, but like finishing the game. I don't know. I think that Missouri is very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like trickery. Like they're tricking you by their record. I think that they're better than what their record says. But yeah, I mean, obviously Kentucky has to kind of win this game. So hopefully they can go in there and do that.
Kenny talked about on the radio yesterday. Obviously, I guess whenever he looked at Missouri, they were 2-9 in the SEC at the time, and he was like, "They're the best 2-9 conference team in the country." That's what he said. He told his team, and maybe he's not far off. I do think, Katie, it's one thing to point out about Missouri. They're the second best 3-point shooting team in the SEC. Who you'd think they'd be sitting maybe a little bit higher record wise with that kind of offensive prowess. 37.5% from three, and then they score, Katie, 70 points per game, which that isn't amazing, but it's not very bad either. That's probably about average points per game, I would say. But 37.5% from 3-point range, like Katie, Missouri, they're going to live and die by the three, but they also tend to give up the three too. So I think we're going to see a lot of shooting come Thursday night, Katie.
Yeah, and I think those games are always pretty fun to watch, especially if the shots are falling. So hopefully when it comes down to it, Kentucky is the team making the shots and not Missouri.
Right. And of course, that game last year at Rupp, I remember it because I remember Grace Slaughter, who, last season as a freshman, like she was pretty good, but this year she's really elevated herself. She's averaging 15.4 points per game, 3.3 rebounds. But Katie, she's shooting 46.6% from beyond the arc. I mean, what in God's name? Like, you're talking about players who can shoot the basketball, Katie. Grace Slaughter is definitely one of those people who can shoot the basketball.
Yeah, I mean, not only is she shooting insanely well from 3, but she's shooting 50% from the field in general. So it's definitely worrying, and you don't want to leave her open. She's also 6'2", so she's pretty tall for a point guard. And I almost can't decide who I think is going to be guarding her just because I feel like since she can shoot the 3 that well, it's got to be someone that can compete with her height. But I'm not really sure yet.
And then you have Lania Randall, 11.3 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, almost 2 steals per game. Ashton Judd, just under 12 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists per game. And then, of course, you have Abby Shriek. I haven't watched too much Missouri, so I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name, but I believe it's Abby Shriek. Uh, 8.4 points, 1.4 rebounds per game. And, you know, as you can see, terrific. I was trying to say, like, I don't even know. Like, horrendous obviously isn't a word. I was trying to say terrific, and I don't even know what the other word would have been. But
Tremendous.
92.3% from the free throw line. She can obviously capitalize on those opportunities whenever she's given them. But Katie, to me, and I know they have multiple double-digit point scores, but to me, Katie Grace Slaughter is kind of the one that Kenny and Kentucky have to zero in on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that definitely, and she averages 31 minutes per game. I think one thing to note about Missouri is that they do kind of have a lot of depth. They have a lot of players that they tend to go to, in, the middle of the game when maybe Grace needs some rest. So hopefully during that time, Kentucky can kind of take advantage of her not being on the floor and kind of extend the lead and kind of make it impossible for Missouri to come back.
It's just one of those things where, again, I know it's on the road. I know they have some decent players. You just got to go win the basketball game, Katie. Like, you're at a point where, again, you have to win this one, split one of the next three. I don't think it's any simpler than that. But, Katie, you talked about Missouri, but there was what would you call this? Like, monumental size, like, absolute. You want to talk about one of the most, like, hype games in Lexington in forever? LSU, 2023 national champions, Kim Mulkey, Flau'jae Johnson, Anissa Morrow, LSU, top 10 LSU, who's only lost to South Carolina and Texas, comes to town, Katie. Both of those games they lost on the road, by the way. LSU 25-2, 10-2 in the SEC, coming to town. Like, LSU is for real. LSU is everything as advertised. This game has been sold out for over it was sold out over a month before it's even scheduled. It was sold out, I think, literally a month and a day before. But Katie, the LSU Tigers, you have two games coming up against the Tigers. Kentucky needs to split one of those games. But LSU, Katie, just Kim Mulkey, everything, like I said, all of the blitz and the glamour, and she's going to come in wearing her colorful jacket. What does Kentucky need to do to win that game against LSU?
First of all, I am really excited to see this game because, um, first of all, Kim Mulkey, I want to see what she's wearing. I think her outfits are always so fun, but she's also just such a great coach, and her teams are always so physical. And I think that that is what is going to be the most important when it comes to winning this game is just staying physical and competing with the team in the paint. Because I mean, they have some decent three-point shooters, but no one really stands out besides Flau'jae Johnson, to me at least. I think that most of the points are going to come from the paint, and so you have to be really prepared for that, you know, the bigs to just completely destroy you in the paint. And, like, obviously you don't want that to happen, but that's their game plan, so.
Well, LSU is so different because they don't have an Angel Reese, right? Like, they're
Mhm.
not. They have bigs, but they don't have an Oldacre like Texas has, and I think that really, really bodes well for Kentucky. I think this is actually a pretty, like, not very favorable because LSU is just so talented, but as far as what their players can do and kind of how Kim Mulkey uses them, I think this is actually one of the more favorable kind of matchups left on the schedule for Kentucky. But LSU, Katie, they can score the ball, they can rebound the basketball. I mean, they do everything that a great team does, right? They're second in the SEC with 86.3 points per game, 47.2 rebounds per game. Like, LSU is just for real. Now, of course, a lot of people know Flau'jae Johnson because she makes music nowadays, but she's also a basketball player, and she's a pretty good one at that. Co-SEC preseason player of the year, 19.5 points, 5.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game. I believe it was Anissa Murray because there was three players there between Flau'jae, Madison Booker at Texas, and I believe Anissa Murray was the other co-SEC player of the year. So LSU has two of them on their team. Katie, she started her career at DePaul and has really turned into she was obviously very good at DePaul, but has exploded into the superstar, player, and especially, rebounder at LSU, right? 18.1 points, 14.4 rebounds per game. Katie, if you ask me, I think Anissa Morrow is probably the biggest matchup problem that Kentucky has, but I think, you know, someone's got to man up, right? Whether it be Tiani Key, Claire Strack, Amelia Hassett, whoever it is, someone's got to man up and take her on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that she's just had such a great year this year because, like you said earlier, there is no Angel Reese. And it's been a lot easier for Flau'jae to kind of shine on this team and be the one to do the stuff and make the shots and, be the star of the team. I do think that she is the one that Kenny is probably focusing on and saying, okay, well, if she gets hot, like, you got to figure something out because she's basically unstoppable when that happens.
It's just one of those things where you just got to see, and I think Kentucky has a size advantage, and I think Kentucky can be physical enough to compete with LSU, but I just have to see it happen, right? And then there's
Mm-hmm.
Michaela Williams, Katie, who came in as a freshman last season and was immediately like one of the best freshmen in the country, and made her stamp, made her impact felt down there, and she's replicated that this season. 17 points per game, shooting grabbing 4.4 rebounds per game, and she's shooting 38.2% from the three. Like, Michaela Williams is another one who, again, I think Kentucky has the size and the athleticism to keep up. It's just going to be interesting to me. I think, again, like I said, I think they have it, Katie. I just need to see it happen. And then Kaylin Gilbert, 9.8 points per game, 2.9 rebounds per game, and then 1.7 assists per game. So I think the thing about LSU, I think back to last season when they had an Angel Reese and they had these players. Like, Kentucky was able to keep up for a lot of that game, and Kentucky wasn't very good at all. I think, and of course, we have a person in here saying if we get a decent call against LSU, unlike Texas, Kentucky can definitely win that game. I agree. Well, if Claire Strack is playing 18 minutes and fouling out, I don't think Kentucky stands a chance in the world. But Katie, kind of going off that, I do think Claire Strack, when you look at this LSU team, I think she's someone who can have a breakout game. Well, not a breakout game, but have a really good game. And I almost think we need to see that if Kentucky is going to pull off the upset against LSU.
Yeah, I think that Kentucky is going to have to get hot from the perimeter, just because I feel like even though, they don't technically – LSU doesn't technically have the size, I think that their guards are very aggressive in the paint, and they can kind of throw up shots, and they always go in. It just seems like that's the way that it works with really good teams is somehow the ball always finds way into the basket. I think that in order to come out with a win from this game, you can't shoot 1 of 12 from 3. It's going to have to be 11 or 12 of 20.
I just think if you're Kentucky, it's like we've said, and it doesn't get simpler than this. You got to win against Missouri. You have to find a way to win one of those next 3. And Katie, why not make it LSU? Why not just beat LSU and, be swell on your way to, what would be a 22-6 record and 11-5 in the SEC? Why not? Why not beat LSU? But, of course, we saw Kentucky wasn't super competitive against Texas. But then again, Texas may be the best team in the country. Texas was a matchup nightmare for Kentucky. I don't know if there's a team in the SEC that Kentucky has a worse matchup against. I mean, again, Kentucky just doesn't have someone who can stop Oldacre. Madison Booker and Taylor Jones are always going to get their own. But I think Kentucky, Katie, matches up much better against LSU. I think we're going to go ahead and call this an episode. It's been a good one. Kentucky, hopefully next time we record, Kentucky is what, 22-4? I think that would put them at 22-4. That would be pretty amazing in year one under Kenny Brooks. I mean, he's already won 20 games, first 20-win season at Kentucky in 5 years. Like, Kenny Brooks done incredible things. He's won 20 games, and I think it's like the 19 of the 23 years he's coached or something. But Katie, before we get out of here, before we look forward to Missouri and LSU, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say thanks to everybody out there watching because the regular season is coming to a close. So all your support so far through the season has just meant everything to me, and I'm sure Phoenix too. But yeah.
Yeah, it's meant a lot. Thank you to everyone. Again, I think it's Katie. I think one of the better things we've done with this podcast is actually go live. It's just hard when you're just like scheduling with people, and everybody's got their own lives coming together. But going live seems to be really good, not just for engagement, but it seems to make things just better overall, Katie. And I think that's always good. Of course, I'm Phoenix Stevens here alongside Katie Hutchison. Kentucky got commented, "Go Cats beat Vandy tonight." That game's tomorrow. Kentucky does not play Vandy tonight. But yeah, we need to see some wins on both the men's and women's side, Katie. And that starts tomorrow, rolling into Thursday, and then Saturday and Sunday too. Katie, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Of course, like I said, I'm Phoenix Stevens alongside Katie Hutchison, wrapping up episode 17 of the Memorial Memo. We will see you guys next time.